Welcome to this METALL webinar on the outlook of for the manufacturing sector, following what's surely been, for everyone on the planet, the weirdest 12 months ever. My name is Tony Summers and I'm a partner at MHA Carpenter Box, heading up our manufacturing sector group. And I realise no one's actually joined this webinar to listen to me drone on. So what I'll do is I'll gallop through the format of today's session and we can hear from the important people that we've managed to assemble for the panel today. We're going to go through a panel session, but before we do open up for the Q&A element of that panel, we'll hear from the panelists. First up, we'll listen to Chris Beck, editor of Manufacturing Management, a national sector magazine for directors, managers and engineers. He'll be telling us his observations of the last 12 months and what he sees on the horizon for the sector as a whole. We'll then hear from two manufacturers, Caton of Brighton Gin and Alan Edmonds of SI Protech. I'll then ask the other panelists to give a brief 30-second intro on themselves and what expertise they bring to the panel. So if any of you are playing webinar lingo bingo, then listen out for a few buzzwords like Brexit, VAT, duty, contracts, force majeure, funding, grants. I could go on, but I reckon if you've got those on your card, you'll be shouting house before too long. Once the intros are over, we'll open up the Q&A session. And I've already got a few questions that have been sent in advance. And if you have any questions, please submit them through the chat function and I'll do my best to put them through to the panel. So enough of me, and I'll hand the baton over to Chris.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thanks. Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. As Tony mentioned, yeah, I'm Chris Beck. I'm the editor of Manufacturing Management, and again, as Tony said, we're the leading publication for the UK's manufacturing sector. We work very closely with manufacturers, industry bodies, suppliers, policymakers, you name it, to spread the word of the industry and report on some of the good work that the sector is up to. And I've been asked along today to give a kind of overview of how the sector is faring after what's been a very odd 12 months, and have a look forward at some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that are out there in the months and years to come. But before we start on that too much, I thought I'd give a quick reminder, a quick demonstration of how important manufacturing is to the UK economy. And I've got a short video courtesy of Make UK, the manufacturers organisation, who I'm sure many of you know, which outlines some of the key facts and figures around the sector. So, after that, don't let anyone say that we don't manufacture anything in the UK anymore. And as it said there at the end of that video, manufacturing benefits every region of the UK. And I know I'm talking to people in the southeast today. Myself, I'm in Kent, and interestingly, the southeast is one of the biggest manufacturing regions. Many people, if you ask the average man on the street, they'd say the northwest or the West Midlands. But if you combine the southeast with London, which many people do, it is the largest region in terms of output. So it contributes well over 28 billion pounds to the economy ahead of the northwest, which is great for the region and great for the country as a whole. Now on to the events of the last year. Now 12 months or so, if you cast your mind back 12 months or so ago, it's fair to say that the manufacturing sector, along with pretty much every other sector out there, was staring into the abyss a bit. The virus was surging, supply chain challenges were rearing their heads, with sourcing parts from China and elsewhere, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen to the wider economy, and this left many business owners and I guess their employees worried about how they were going to survive even in the short term. The picture was pretty bleak. The monthly purchasing managers index, the PMI, which I'm sure many of you will know, but it gives a weighted average of the industry's outlook on a number of factors, ranging everything from employment prospects to orders to exports. It hit a record low in the 30 odd years they've been doing the survey of just 32.8, and anything above 50 shows a growing sector. Anything under 50 shows contraction. So it was really worrying times. The government, of course, stepped in, introduced various schemes to help businesses. Chief amongst these was the Furlough Scheme, and at the start of March, about a fifth of all workers across the UK were furloughed in some capacity, and over 60% of manufacturers have at least one employee still on furlough. Now the government is obviously extending that scheme until September of this year, which is undoubtedly going to help businesses through the next phase of the pandemic. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about furlough more as the conversation goes on. In addition to that, there have been numerous changes to employment laws, things that we wouldn't have dreamt of, just over a year ago, around quarantining and having to take time off if you catch the virus, and all the social distancing and everything else that has to take place on site. Manufacturers are in a relatively unusual position compared to other sectors. They can't get everyone to work from home. Not everyone has a production line or a lathe in their shed to be able to do that. So the people watching this are going to know more than most how that has proved to be a challenge, not just in making the working environment safe, but ensuring the right people are on site at the right time. You've got enough staff to cover the jobs that need doing. Of course, it's not all bad news. One of the most striking things from kind of this time last year, just as the pandemic was hitting its peak, was the way that many manufacturers pivoted and worked together to produce medical equipment. Gin distilleries. We've got Kathy on the call today, making hand sanitizer and other things to automotive manufacturers and all sorts, making parts for ventilators and other urgently needed PPE. There's some of that's been tarnished a little bit with the news about the Prime Minister and Dyson this week, but that shouldn't detract from the point that manufacturers deserve serious credit for the way they stepped up during the pandemic. And I mentioned ventilators. The Ventilator Challenge, which was a consortium of manufacturers, large and small, who worked together to manufacture ventilators, produced over 13,000 in just 2.5 months, starting from scratch, repurposing factories, establishing brand new supply chains, reskilling their workers to be able to produce specialist parts and getting them out to hospitals just when they were needed. And it's my hope that the sector continues this spirit of collaboration going forward. By working together, we've proved that we could achieve pretty amazing things. So that was the last 12 months or so. Now let's look at where we are and what kind of position we're in, I suppose, as things start to open up again and the economy begins to recover. Now, the good news is that the early signs are pretty promising. A report from Lloyds Bank earlier this week found that manufacturing companies, this is nationwide, are seeing growth hit a 6-month high, especially in the electronics industry, electronics manufacturing, which is something that the Southeast in particular is very strong in. And there's momentum in the recovery, and smart businesses are going to be the ones who are looking to ride that wave now. Things like technology have really come to the fore in the last 12 months or so. I mean, a year or so ago, we didn't even know what Zoom was, and now here we are, hosting a webinar, hosting a panel discussion. But I've also heard stories of manufacturers using Microsoft Teams. There's one company that springs to mind. They make skylights for roofs, and they use Teams to collaborate their design and their sales and their installation teams. And it started off just as a kind of daily or weekly catch up just to see how everything was going, and has now turned into the installation team when they're on site fitting a skylight, having the design team available on Teams to kind of talk through any problems that they're having with installation. And it's massively saved the amount of rework and product defects that they've had with skylights not fitting. So there's one example of how technology in a time of crisis, companies have really stepped up and used technology. Trouble is, the UK lags not far behind, but a significant way behind other industrialized nations, Germany, America, even dare I say France, when it comes to things like automation and robotics. And we run the risk of falling even further behind as the economy begins to recover. But there is help out there. In the budget way back in March, the Chancellor announced a super deduction, tax break for companies to claim 130% of their expenditure on new plant and machinery against their tax liability. And this is a good step, and it has been welcomed by industry. Many manufacturers say that of all the things announced in the budget, that is one thing that is going to spark them and push them forward to invest and will make a real difference. But it is only valid for 2 years. So if you've got longer term investment plans, it's probably going to struggle. Investment isn't something that's flexible. Surprisingly, I've got this far without mentioning the elephant in the room, Brexit. And here in the Southeast, we were projected at the end of last year, all the horror stories about delays at Dover, lorry park on the M20, Manson Airport being turned into a lorry park. Touch wood, after the first couple of weeks or so back in January, none of that seems to have materialized to any great extent, but there are still obviously significant issues. Our old friend, the Purchasing Managers Index survey from March this time, found that the sector is really struggling with supply chain challenges, with delays from suppliers disrupting production and distribution schedules. Vendor lead times lengthened to the second greatest extent in the survey's history, partly due to the pandemic, but also due to low stocks at suppliers, disruption at the port, shipping delays, and other post-Brexit issues. So looking forward, automation and technology will come to the fore, meaning manufacturers are going to need to look at new skill sets for their staff, more technical, more software-based even skill sets. Sustainability is also going to be more important than ever before. Today is Earth Day. You've seen a lot of things come out of America and Japan today, talking about emissions cuts and everything else. And Glasgow is hosting the COP26 climate change conference later in the year, hopefully in person. I think they've got contingency plans. The UK government is announcing stricter emissions targets, something to keep on top of if you're a manufacturer. But it's also an opportunity. The green economy is something that is really, if you're looking at a new market to kind of develop into, then the green economy is where to go, I'd advise. So just to kind of quickly sum up, times are still hard, obviously, but the economy is beginning to open up. Business confidence, manufacturing output is starting to grow. All the data is pointing towards this. The latest PMI, despite the Brexit delays and the supply chain challenges that I just mentioned, the March PMI hit its highest level for just over 10 years in March this year. So, and people responding to that also said that they've seen a rise in orders, not just from the UK, but abroad, which is having an effect on job creation and beginning to bring down the unemployment numbers. But don't get complacent. Make UK, again, found that a quarter of manufacturers don't see businesses returning to pre-pandemic levels for at least another year, with a similar number saying it will take at least 6 months. Within that, of course, sectors like the aerospace industry will likely suffer for even longer if they ever recover at all. So does that mean the government's going to need to provide extra support, either through grants or an even further extension to furlough just to these sectors? And what's going to happen to them and the jobs within them once that safety net, once that rug is whipped away? There's an argument to be had that, you know, those furloughed roles, do they even need to exist? Companies will be, you know, thinking about that. Could those people on furlough be reskilled or repurposed within the organisation? Whether the recovery takes 6 months, a year, or even longer, manufacturing has to be front and centre of it. In my opinion, the sector has had a rocky year, but has come out of it with a significant boost to its public image, thanks to, you know, the collaborative efforts of many manufacturers during the pandemic. Of course, Brexit, the challenges around trade are set to remain for quite some time. But if there's one thing UK manufacturers are world class at, it's problem solving and showing their resilience. So I've got absolutely no doubt at all that the industry will be leading the way as we enter the new normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Some very interesting topics, and I think we'll come back to one or two of those again. One thing that struck me from the numbers, you said fourth biggest importer. I hadn't appreciated we were the fourth biggest importer, yet only the 10th biggest exporter. That kind of shows we've got some capacity in terms of what we could be doing in this country. Okay, at this point, I think we'll hand over to Kathy. We'll go ladies first and our two manufacturers on the panel. So Kathy, over to you.
Well done for the ladies first. It's been quite a long time since I've fit under that banner. Hi, my name's Kathy Caton. I'm the founder of Brighton Gin. Just to be very clear, it's gin as in this, not as in weightlifting, because people often mishear me when I say it and look disappointed and point out that I'm not a good advocate for a gym at all. So some really interesting things that Chris has just brought up. There's some really interesting stats that I should be nabbing for future talks and things. You guys are all people who definitely don't need telling how incredibly difficult from pretty much every single direction the last over a year has been. We are one of those companies where I feel incredibly grateful actually that we've been able to pretty much turn on a sixpence and change our business hopefully temporarily overnight. So looking back to March last year with the closure of hospitality, that shut basically about 90% of our sales outlets, which have pretty much actually remained shut until last week. So to take a business that was very much, we were totally on a scale and grow agenda, but very much with sustainability at our core. So very interesting to hear these things around, you know, green growth and the things that should be just vital bits of our manufacturing stories from here on in. But one of the things that we were able to do as our business basically looked like it could possibly die a death was to change our production overnight. We didn't have any sales, but we did have a distillery full of ethanol and kit and a creative bunch of people who wanted to be literally part of the solution. And we ended up making this guy, hold that up there, which is a not-for-profit hand sanitizer, which we're still making over a year later. And that I also can't believe, something I thought was going to be 3 or 4 weeks of there's this moment of crisis, let's come and help. So we're still making them a year later and they're still not for profit. Basically for every one of those that sold through the website, 2 more are donated to frontline workers, delivery drivers, actually all sorts of people who've really helped keep the country and the community moving over the last year. So I can solidly say that was never in any of my business plans at all. But it hasn't just been into hand sanitizer that we've moved our business. Again, I feel very fortunate compared with many others that we did have a direct-to-consumer arm through the website. It had never been a big focus because our focus was all about trying to build the brand through the on-trade, through the big volume going through wholesalers. Again, they've all been shut for the last year. So we were really fortunate in being able to turn quickly towards focusing on the website, direct-to-consumer sales, changing our website platform so we could use Shopify to integrate much better with Xero and all of the systems that we're using behind the scenes. So as we tentatively come out of lockdown, it's a beautiful, beautiful day in Brighton today, and every cafe and bar that's got an outside space is packed at the moment. So, but it's early days, isn't it? We don't know what's around the corner. But as we come out of lockdown, we've got a whole array of new products, not just the hand sanitizer. We also do an eco refill, and we've made this so this can be used with any spray pump dispenser. I think this hand sanitizer is probably going to be with us for a while yet, and this whole change of behaviour. But we've also developed, we've released a new gin size. We're working on, I was really hoping to have some to show you today, but we've had a supply chain issue. So I can't show you the prototypes of our ready to drink cans that we're making. We released a ready to drink product last May, actually, so about a year ago. Originally, that was planned as something for people to drink on the train, after your crowded commute. And then that overnight, again, we would change it into, well, this actually is a safe single serve. There's no sharing of bottles or anything like that. So we're working on a whole new array of cans. We've gone to cans for eco reasons. They're endlessly recyclable, much longer shelf life. And we think also that in terms of people socialising outside, let's use the beach as an example, where you definitely shouldn't be taking a bottle with you, but actually if you can take a lovely can of super premium Brighton gin with a locally made tonic, or made with raspberries or lemon verbena, there's all of this stuff. So actually we've been, despite the fact that on more than one occasion, in fact, on many occasions over the last year, I have been awake at 4 a.m. going, is my business 10 years into its journey going to die? We've still kept innovating and making and creating. Final thing, got my eye on my timer so I don't bang on for too long. The challenges, that we'll use that lovely catch-all term of everything Brexit shaped, have been spectacularly difficult. Again, I count myself really, really lucky that we've been able to, as basically all of our European distributors have just gone, it's too difficult. It's just too difficult. And even in terms of sending individual consumers packages, which we were doing happily through our website sales, they all just came back from DPD in a big thing with a note saying we can't do the paperwork. So those, I feel cheered to hear some things that Chris was saying about positive things around Brexit at our level, which I guess is probably quite micro. We're waiting for the positive things to shake down to our level. But Brighton's a place of creativity and resource, and we'll always find a way around things. I hope that there is a rosy future ahead. We're still really determined to grow and scale. We want to take the spirit of Brighton to the world in a literal and metaphorical sense. And I think that with our food and drink exports and manufacturing in the south of England, we can really, really do it. But those challenges, well, I'm looking forward to hearing all of your views and comments on them, because the challenges are definitely there. But you can always have a gin and tonic at the end of the day. That's a good thing.
Thank you for ending on such a high. That's a classic example, or your story is a classic example of the adaptability that I think Chris was referring to in UK manufacturing. Alan, you're up.
Hi, I'll just share these slides. Good afternoon, everybody. Right, so My company, SI Protech, is based in Littlehampton. We have a 20-year history of designing, developing and producing innovative high-spec injection moldings and assemblies, primarily for the beverage industry. Typically, these are valves, regulators, dispensing systems, solutions for multinational brewers. Obviously, Brexit has been mentioned by the two previous speakers, and I will talk about that because we've had particular problems because we export 70% of our products, mainly to Europe, with a small amount to South and North America. We are located in Littlehampton, occupy 28,000 square feet. We currently employ 40 people, some of whom are temps because we have a degree of seasonality, although that is slightly changing as we have become slightly more counter-cyclic in terms of Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And we produce 75 million parts and assemblies, and we're currently operating at a 5 Sigma level. Those engineers amongst you will know what that means. It's about 200 parts per million failure rate. This time last year, COVID and Brexit was seen as a big threat. Now, we downed our forecast significantly for 2020, but actually it turned out okay in the end, and in fact we hit our budget sales, albeit we didn't hit our budget profit because our costs were significantly higher, but that was mainly because of the switch in the market, as has already been said by Kathy. Obviously the on-trade premises, on-trade sales declined significantly, but was more than compensated by home sales. Now, fortunately, we were serving customers who did have a range of products for the home sales market, of which we were providing packaging solutions. So that sector did rather well and more than compensated, I say, for the loss in those other sectors. Internally, yes, I mean the procedures were a bit more challenging, but as a drink related manufacturer, we had a lot of those hygiene procedures already in place. It's mainly in the social context of people, you know, in the canteen and so on, that we had to change behaviours. So it wasn't a significant step up. We did make changes to the way we pay people when they're off sick. We didn't want people coming back early because they felt they needed to earn a decent wage. So we changed our sick pay scheme. We were already earmarked to do that, and we've perpetuated that. That won't go back. We have much more generous sick pay arrangements now. Now, as far as Brexit is concerned, well, good. We ended up with no tariffs. Bad, I mean, I attended countless seminars during the second half of last year, including some from well-known transport companies, and they were all talking a fantastic game. My experience and our experience was that that was talking a good game, because the realities hit in the new year, and as a SME, we have been unable to deliver according to contract, and our customers, on some product lines, have insisted we deliver DDP, and nobody wants to touch it. As a result of that, we found that it's virtually impossible to deliver DDP without a significant EU presence. And with the legislative changes within the EU, free circulation of goods using third-party logistics, etc., won't be possible post-July, and we're going to end up having a subsidiary operation, which is caused me a bit of grief, because our given that our exports are so high, it's a big chunk of our business effectively going through some sort of brass plate organisation located probably in the Netherlands. So our future focus, because in fact what happened was that every brewer and his dog has been looking at home sales, because there will be a switch that switch will not go back the way it was. So home sales will be increasingly important, and innovation in dispense for various drinks, including RTDs, which was mentioned by Kathy, wine, etc. There are lots of innovations going on out there to improve the consumer experience with home dispense. Creativity, innovation, speedy development, and hanging on to some of our own intellectual property and not letting it all pass to our customers is key. Obviously, sustainability, impact in design, and increasingly the Internet of Things. We're being asked to provide more devices in order to facilitate improved dispense, information for the consumer, tracking, tracing, etc., etc. Information technology obviously is always there, along with increased investment in automation. We're reasonably automated now, but we are going to spend a lot more money, and that's to drive quality and of course improve productivity. But in order to support all of that, we need to improve particularly our technical and management skills. So we're fully engaging with the local providers, both college and university, from level 2 to degree apprentices. And we're doing a lot more in-house bite-size training around leadership, financial, lean, Six Sigma, and so on. So we feel confident about the future. Once I've got over this immediate problem of delivery DDP, hopefully I can recover some of the sales that I've lost in the first 3 months of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So interestingly, some of the points that you've mentioned there are questions that I've got coming up. So we'll come back to some of those, I'm sure. The questions are starting to come in, which is good because that makes my job a little bit easier. So thank you for those. If we don't get to cover everything, then we'll try and, as a collective, either answer those questions by email to everybody or put them on the METALL website. Before I start the Q&A session, can I just mention that at the end of that particular Q&A session, I'm going to throw up some popularity polls on the screen, not on the panel. There's not the popularity contest on those guys, but it's more about what possible topics we might have for future METALL events. And you can click on more than one topic that you think will be of interest to you. So there'll be 20 in total, just click away. So I'll be doing that at the end. So please hang around for that. In fact, it was in a previous poll that resulted in us having manufacturers on the panel. So we do listen to the feedback that we get. Also, at the end of the webinar, I'll also signpost Edge Digital's breakfast sessions specifically for manufacturing businesses that might be of interest to you. Right, I'm going to kick off with some questions now, and I'm going to start with questions for Kathy and Alan, although I might well open it up to one or two other members of the panel. I've got a question from Rob, and he asks, thinking of the impact of COVID now and in the future, putting aside all the personal tragedy and disasters that happened, what good will come out of COVID, if any? I'll throw that to Kathy and Alan first. So Kathy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question.
Oh, sorry. One thing, I didn't do the intro for the panel first. Sorry. Pause that thought. I'm going to go. Let's go in the order that I've got. I've got Dan in the top corner of my screen. Dan, 30 seconds.
Sure. I'm a tax partner at Carpenter Box, and I specialise in indirect taxes. So, the last 6 months in particular, I've spent most of my working life kind of dealing with Brexit related issues, you know, the dreaded word that was mentioned earlier. And I think it's fair to say, and I'd echo a lot of what Alan has said, that, you know, coming up to Brexit, there was a lot of, don't worry, everything will be fine. You know, the shipping companies, yeah, we've got it all sorted. The government saying, don't worry, we've got an agreement with Europe, it'll all be easy. And then come 1st of January, you actually try and do any of this in practice, anything from a little bit difficult to complete disaster on the scale. So there's so many considerations, there's been so many problems, but thankfully things are starting to ease up. There have been some further developments. Everyone knows what they're doing a little bit better now, so it is becoming a bit easier. There are some substantial changes in the EU coming in on the 1st of July, which should make things easier as well. But yeah, that's really what I've been focusing on for the last 6 months. So I can definitely understand and feel the pain that some of you might be feeling if you are doing a lot of trade with Europe in particular.
Lou, over to you, Lou. Intro, 30 seconds.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, no, it's not. It's good afternoon. It's been a long day already. Sorry, Lou Williams. I'm the growth manager for the Coastal Capital Growth Hub. We provide free business support. We have a team of growth relationship managers. In fact, we have a lovely Karen Tyrrell is part of one of our participants, so you can always message her through the chat function. We've just completed a very successful peer networks program, fully funded by Bays. So we recruited nearly 90 businesses to come on the peer-to-peer network program. We ran 10 cohorts. We've had some phenomenal successes. In fact, Alan and Kathy were both in different cohorts on the program. We actually achieved a net promoter score of over 70%, which in terms of the way they categorize that, that's world class. So very successful program. We are now launching on the 1st of May, the next year's peer networks cohorts, and the links are on our website if you want to apply. All the criteria are there. And we're hoping to do 110 businesses this time. So I'd urge you all to have a look at our portal, go to Peer Networks and apply, please, because it's free. So it's and I think Alan and both Kathy can speak well of the program and what they got out of it. So thanks very much, Tony.
Thank you. Debbie.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button at that point. So, hi everyone. So I'm Debbie Venn, partner at DMH Stallard in our commercial team. I suppose in terms of challenges, particularly in the last 12 months, we've been helping clients with a plethora of different issues, and we cover lots of different sectors, obviously manufacturing being one of our key sectors. And I'd say during March through to June last year, a lot of what we were doing was crisis management and assistance and support to a lot of our clients where they were directly, immediately impacted by COVID and the challenges that sort of threw up in terms of continuation with existing contracts, defaults on contractual obligations and how we deal with that and the disruption in the supply chain, how they could source different sort of materials elsewhere, but then what effect is that on their existing contracts. And we were reviewing a lot of force majeure provisions, advising on frustration of contract issues and all sorts last year. So that was very much a sort of a in the moment support to a lot of our clients in manufacturing on that. And then throwing Brexit into the mix towards the end of last year, that also required a lot of checking of reviewing existing contracts that clients had in place, looking at the validity of those contracts, particularly when they're international and overseas, what challenges that then faced, threw up in terms of logistics and in terms of trading. Alan already mentioned, being required to comply with DDP sort of arrangements, and looking at the use of Incoterms would that still be appropriate? So in addition to the contracts that you were existing and carrying on, when we were looking at new arrangements, those have been very much in the forethought of everyone's minds, like, practically speaking, what can or can't happen when it comes to Brexit. What do we need to put in place, governing law and jurisdiction, those sorts of issues. So it has been a challenging time, both for sort of clients on the customer and supplier side, and those are the sort of the main things that we're looking at the moment, and just trying to support the clients through those issues.
Okay, thank you, and apologies to the panel for not getting them the intro opportunity. So back to Cathy and Alan. You've had a long time now to think about that first question that I asked. So what good, if any, is going to come out of COVID?
Well, I'm happy to lump in. I'm hoping that there will be two things that stick. And there's that whole thing, isn't there, about what's going to be sticky behaviour and what isn't. How quickly will we revert back to, do we have short memories or not? I really hope that one of the things that sticks is people valuing local and what we do on our doorsteps and in our patch. Now, obviously, I would say that because I make a product called Brighton Gin, which is a locally identified thing. But I think actually, whether it's in terms of people going, oh, actually, my grocer at the top of the road or my fishmonger managed to keep fresh food coming to me when other things didn't, and also that thing of going, I know if I spend my pound carefully, the good that can do through the wider community. So that's thing one. Thing two that I hope sticks is so amidst all of the challenges, actually we've had some real opportunities open up to us. So traditionally, export is a massive target for us. It's actually where we see all of our really, really long-term growth coming from. And previously, generally, as a gin maker, you wouldn't be taken seriously in a market unless you'd been at least once, but usually twice, done a market visit, showed you were serious about going to meet people and so. And courtesy of everyone around the world staying at home, we've been able to have meetings with potential distributors in New Zealand and Singapore and Japan and places that would be really bloody expensive to physically get to, let alone getting in front of someone. And actually, we've just been able to send them some gin and then have a chat with them at home. So that's something that I hope stays. I also really, really desperately want to go do some travel, but I think, do we really need to be making as many journeys as we did do previously? I think the planet has benefited from us all having a bit of time sat at home. So I hope that sticks, or that there's a bit of balance between things.
Okay, Alan?
Yes, well, as Cathy said, picking up on the last point, I mean, air miles, I mean, we did do quite a lot of traveling, particularly to Europe, but because we got to work in South America and North America, yeah, one or two people have racked up a few air miles, and we haven't had to do that. And one of the things really has been benefits and lasting benefit, I believe, is improved customer comms, more and better communication, multi-level communication in teams. So we have more cross-functional, multi-level team meetings with our customers, where that was more difficult to arrange when you've got to fly there and arrange a meeting. Yeah, it's much easier to be on a Zoom, or we use Teams. People comms, that's definitely improved through the use of the tool, but also I think generally because of the need to communicate more. We had a crisis team which ran right up until October last year, where we were regularly communicating every dotted I and T regarding what was going on in terms of COVID regs and changes in procedures and so forth. And we're maintaining some of that, and then tighter auditing of our procedures. So we saw a lot of benefit from ramping up our auditing internal audits, and those things will stick. Yeah.
Okay. Chris, if I can throw that same question to you.
Yeah.
For the sort of sector as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alan and Kathy are kind of cases in point, really, about something I mentioned earlier around just being more agile in responding to challenges. Kathy making hand sanitizer, and Alan as well innovating with new ways of doing things. And I think that's something that's one good thing. From my perspective, one good thing that's come out of the last 12 months is just how businesses look at things in a slightly different way now. There's, certainly amongst, the big, some of the big manufacturers in the UK, if you think about BAE Systems or Jaguar Land Rover or any of the big car manufacturers, they're very much traditionally a closed shop. What we do is a secret, and we're not going to share it with anyone. Things like the Ventilator Challenge that I mentioned saw them just opening up and sharing ideas and sharing skills and expertise in a way that had never really been seen before, and the results of that were pretty incredible. I mean, I said 13,000 ventilators in about 2 months from nothing, and from what I've heard, that sort of mindset is here to stay. Obviously not to the same extent, but I think I can see the industry becoming a lot more collaborative and a lot more willing to share ideas. And I think, companies just understand the power of collaboration and working together. Obviously not sharing your state secrets and giving away too much information, but in where there's scope for collaboration, they're definitely more open to that.
Okay. On a similar vein, the next question, again, I'm going to throw it to Kathy and to Alan. This is one's from Ben. In one word, has Brexit been good or bad for your business? Bad. Alan? Bad. Chris, across the sector, one word?
Can I say mixed?
Mixed. Okay, yeah, that works. Okay, and similarly, he's also said, in one word, has COVID been good or bad for your business overall?
Bad.
Bad.
Loads of our customers are going to have gone out of business. Poor sods. That's more than one word.
And Chris?
Short-term bad, long-term good. That's
okay.
Even more words.
Yeah, no, the statistician in me says you can't draw extrapolate from a sample of 2, but that's not good, is it? Okay. I've got another question, which again is slightly linked to this, so I'll stick with Kathy and Alan for the time being, if I may. Sarah says, given what companies have experienced over the last 12 months, have you been making plans for what happens when the world gets COVID-23? And have you generally had to rethink your risk management and business continuity plans?
Oh, Alan, do you want to go first?
Well, to the last point about business continuity, yes. And as I said, I think I said a lot of the procedures that we have put in place, a lot of those will stay. And yes, I did mention, certainly we're having some debates about vaccination levels. We've got some people who are reluctant to have the vaccination. Obviously, we do lateral flow tests. We started that. We bought them ourselves. We did that before the government obviously offered them for free. And we've had to do quite a lot of persuasion about getting people to do that. Now, fortunately, we've got 2 refuseniks in the organisation. I'd like to think we will be in much better shape to cope with whatever comes next in terms of COVID. But of course, a bit like war, you base your strategy often on the last one, not the one that you go into.
Yeah, true. Debbie, have you got anything to add on risk management and business continuity aspects. You're mute.
I was just about to say something and realised I hadn't clicked the button. Yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the things that we've seen clients looking at specifically on business continuity is what to do in the event that you can't source materials for your manufacturing process, what happens in the event that your production line has to come to a halt, things like that. One of the things that has been cropping up quite a lot is also business disruption insurance, and whether or not, for example, whether you have in place business interruption insurance, which is actually allowing you to make a claim. So we've had two examples at the moment where one client has very successfully been able to claim on their business interruption insurance. They run an exhibition event, and they do 2 a year, one in the US, one in Europe, and they haven't been able to go ahead with either of those. They have been very successful in being able to recover their costs of cancellation for those events. However, then working with another client on a manufacturing basis, they have been refused a business interruption insurance claim for various reasons, and they've said that the policy would cover it if, for example, the building burned down, but it wouldn't cover it if you couldn't attend the building to carry on your business, which, you know, splits hairs a lot, but it does go to looking at what's really important in your insurance policies. So I think business continuity generally, you've got sort of how you've protected the business by potential insurance, but also what your contracts might say with that as well. So you might have terms and conditions in place with customers with either force majeure provisions, which give you some relief of time to comply, or if you can't comply, there might also be business continuity policies that are attached to those contracts, depending on what whether you're supply or customer side. So it's yeah, a lot of those things I think need to be looked at now in the wake of some of these points with COVID and with Brexit, just to see what might need updating as well.
Those are really good points. Anecdotally, I don't know of anyone who has been able to successfully claim with their business, including us, with their business interruption insurance, and so that can leave a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, particularly when people have, you know, paid significant funds for those over the years. Yeah. I think one of the things that I mean, both on a personal and professional front, done so much reflecting, and there's been plenty of time to reflect over the last year. And I think one of the things that I might be thinking more about is, because we've tended to follow, we've been very lean, i.e. haven't got much cash in the business at any time, but, you know, that's a methodology to follow, and the whole and just in time manufacture and all of the things that have been quite, I suppose, kind of dominant business thoughts and of the last few years. I think, you know, it was very, although we weren't directly affected, again, I know many people, when the Suez ship issue happened, that suddenly all of their production had just it ground to a halt. And I think those lessons about maybe is there a path of the middle way between being lean and just in time, but actually trying to think more about what are the things that we can potentially mitigate for in the future, and the things that we can't. There could be an asteroid on the way. Who knows? So yeah, I don't have any conclusive answers actually, but I think I'm definitely thinking about, do we need to change some of these things on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I suppose the worst things can happen, it seems. Okay.
Yeah, go on. Another observation, Tony, sorry. The other thing that a lot of clients are looking at in terms of choice with suppliers, if you do have certain choices with suppliers, some are having arrangements in place as backup. So you've got your normal standard arrangements in place with your preferred suppliers, but you also have not necessarily contracts in place with other suppliers, but you've got other suppliers that you know you could potentially call upon who might have different supply chains. So they might not have to source materials from so far away. They might be closer, which means they might be able to deliver more in time if you've been let down by an existing supplier that has got some material stuck on the Suez Canal or you know, all over the place. So I suppose it's looking at your supply chain quite critically and seeing whether or not there's any improvements that could be made which would assist a business continuity plan as well. So sorry, just thought I'd add that. So
Tony, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm scrolling through the questions. It's because I have sirens going by every now and then. I'm in Crawley. I've been scrolling through the questions that are coming through, and I'm also conscious of some of the other things that have come through in advance. So there's been quite a few mentions of DDP, and a lot of manufacturers are experiencing problems with DDP, probably more so than we were all expecting. Dan, briefly, what are those problems, and why have so many been caught out?
Well, I think it's first probably relevant to explain what it actually means to be doing something delivered DDP, and that means delivered duty paid. And I think where a lot of people in the manufacturing sector in particular have been caught out is that no one really expected the need to deliver under DDP. I mean, fundamentally, when you're talking about business-to-business transactions, the customer, the other end of the chain, should be in a position to pay and reclaim any VAT in the country of destination. Should be, you know, relatively easy for them, no different than if they bought from a domestic supplier. The real difference is the duty that might be due. Now, as we all know, we've got this free trade arrangement with the EU, and in most cases there shouldn't be any duty. So frankly, a supply from a UK business to another business somewhere in the EU should be no real different than a supply either domestically or from an EU nation. So in many cases, the expectation is that these kind of arrangements would be under DAP, delivered at place, and what that means is the customer is responsible for any VAT and duties. And as I just said, there shouldn't have been any duties, and the VAT, in some cases, it's pay it, reclaim it on your VAT return. In other countries, it's a simple accounting exercise. But what we have seen more and more is that businesses in Europe in particular, I think Anna mentioned it earlier, they're just not really interested in the detail. They just want to make their lives as easy as possible. And they know if it's DDP terms, they don't have any responsibility whatsoever. But that does cause significant problems for the supplier, because then you face either kind of a significant irrecoverable VAT cost, which will often make the whole transaction unviable, or you have extra administration, which may involve VAT registrations within the EU to avoid those problems. So it has been quite difficult, and in my experience, often it's just, you know, misunderstanding of what the requirements are, whether or not it would cause problems for people, and kind of that sometimes lack of time and just the route of least resistance. It's, you know, we being the country that have left the EU, we need to make it easy for companies in the EU to continue to buy from us. And, you know, there have been a number of cases where clients have come to me and said, well, you know, my customer said, well, you know, you've got to make it just as easy, or I'll just go and find a supplier down the road, or I'll go and find one in the country over. So, you know, it is difficult, and I don't think there is an easy answer, because if there was, everyone would be doing it. But I mean, my advice is very much it's review the contractual arrangements with your customers, in particular in the EU, and it's a bit of an education piece to try and set out simply why going to DAP terms is a better solution for everyone involved. It makes life much easier for the supplier, and it really shouldn't cause any headaches for the customer. And the only exception to that, I might add, is if UK businesses are not wholly manufacturing goods here, where they're importing them into the UK themselves, because that can cause duty issues.
Can I add some?
Yeah, go on.
Dan's totally right. I mean, the customer basically, yes, we had DDP in our contracts going back many years. It wasn't relevant because we were part of the EU. But our customer just basically wants, you know, frictionless trade. It doesn't want the aggro. And in some cases where they're dual source, because they have done the strategic dual sourcing and it happens to be on the continent, it's easier to buy from the other source than it is. In fact, I've turned away sales to the second source because I can't get transport companies to deliver DDP. Now, basically they say our account's not big enough. We're too busy handling multinationals DDP deliveries, yeah, and they will take it on and they will manage it, yeah. But for a company of our size, the companies don't want to take the risk that they're going to get snarled up. And whilst a lot of our deliveries might be full loads, which are less of a problem, if you're shipping DDP consolidated, you will not get anybody to do it. Yeah, consolidated shipments, having, you know, half a dozen customers on one truck and somebody's paperwork's wrong, yeah. They just don't want to entertain it. So the practicalities are, and for the customer, yeah, fine, DAP, and we've persuaded customers to take it. That's because we're sole supplier, so they haven't got a lot of choice. Yeah, DAP. But the reality is, they don't want the aggro of the freight forwarder phoning them up and telling them you've got to clear this invoice ASAP or whatever. And then they've got people running around in their finance system, all right, bucking what there's normally their payment terms to fit in with the shipping dates. Yeah, it doesn't fit in with their normal check run or their payment runs or whatever. They just don't want the aggravation. They say that's the contract, deliver it. Now to do that, yeah, as I indicated earlier, from everything I am now finding out, that come July, you know, up to July, we were looking at having a third-party logistics company pump it into the warehouse. They distribute it to our customers across Europe because we deliver to various countries. But come July, that situation changes because the EU is not going to allow that to happen.
Well, it does, but it might be worth mentioning at this stage, Alan, that there are changes in July, but some of them may seem on the face of it to be negative, but there are some changes which should make trading into the EU a bit easier come July, particularly for kind of B2C sales, so business to consumer, but nevertheless business to business can be included within it. There's going to be a range of new schemes around the what's known as the one-stop shop, which will enable businesses, including those established outside the EU, so UK businesses, to establish a type of one-stop shop VAT registration in one EU country, which will allow them to route goods through that country, and it doesn't necessarily need to be permanent establishments or subsidiaries or anything like that, and distribute across the EU on effectively DDP terms without the same administrative burden that they would face now of having multiple VAT registrations and guarantees and things like that. So I'm not saying that it's all problem solved and going to be easy as Larry, but it certainly will be an improvement from what we've got now, and maybe
I think that perhaps we could take this outside, because everything I'm getting from KPMG, etc., we're getting all different mixed messages, but people on the ground are telling me in Holland you need to have a company register in Holland to deliver to free circulate after July goods. That's what I'm being told, and I've been told that by at least 2 organisations now, one in Germany and one in Holland. So,
and what it's always going to rely on, it's going to depend on trading arrangements with customers and how businesses work, and for some businesses that will need to be the case, but for many others there may well be ways that it can be structured. But you are quite right, Alan, that there is a lot of conflicting information out there a lot at the moment, and partly that's because the EU were meant to implement this scheme on the 1st of January this year. They obviously haven't, and it was only, I think, maybe it was at the beginning of last week, they've published their updated guidance on what their plans are now. So they are committed to get this new scheme in place by the 1st of July, but the actual operational details of how that's going to work are still emerging. So much like the frustrations we had approaching Brexit, where, you know, we were a week away and everyone was saying, so how's it going to work in practice? And the government was saying, well, we've got free trade arrangement. Okay, how's that going to work in practice? And there was not a single bit of practical guidance anywhere because they hadn't finished deciding how it was going to work. And that's exactly what we've got with this new European Union scheme. There's this high-level publication of how what the outcome of the scheme will be. And then businesses are going, great, how will it work in operation? And it's the usual, guidance will be published in due course. When we figure it out, we'll let you know. So watch this space to a certain extent on that front.
Okay, Dan, if I can, you mentioned something to me, I think it was yesterday, about some companies that you have an experience of, where they were moving things that they were manufacturing overseas for part of that manufacturing process and then back to the UK and then maybe out to overseas again to different components. And also another company that was sending things out for repair. Can you just quickly touch on those?
Yeah, one thing that has really come to light, and this is very relevant for the manufacturing sector actually, is that the free trade arrangement between the UK and the EU is nowhere near as straightforward as it was first publicised, which I'm sure will come as a shock to no one. But in particular, it's rules around origin of goods which have provided to be somewhat problematic. So in very simplistic terms, goods manufactured in the UK can be sent to the EU duty-free and vice versa. But there are a number of complications in this, such as, UK companies which are manufacturing goods in the UK, but they might be importing a lot of the materials or parts of the products from elsewhere in the world. So to give a really good example of that is the textiles industry. If you were importing all of your kind of material from India or China or somewhere else in the world into the UK, and you're importing, say, all of your cotton and maybe just ready to use and turn into shirts in the UK, you might think, well, that finished shirt is a product that's manufactured in the UK and should fall within those requirements. Now, as it happens, the UK's got very strict rules on textiles and what's considered to be manufactured here. And for that industry, there's 3 different tests of, you have to do 2 of the 3 in the UK. So you almost have to be taking raw material, and by raw material, I mean unprocessed cotton, and doing the whole process in the UK to meet that UK origin requirement. So you'd find, what we're finding is a lot of people in the clothing sector, that manufacture clothes here, even though they're getting raw materials and they're doing substantially all the production here, it's not considered to be UK produced goods, therefore doesn't benefit from the free trade arrangement. So, this is going to affect lots of manufacturing companies, because you will often be importing materials in order for your manufacturing process. And where you are importing raw materials, in most cases you will be fine. But I've got one client, they manufacture kind of systems for the farming industry, and a lot of their components they import pre-assembled, and they do all the assembly in the UK, and they do a lot of manufacturing here as well. But because some of the parts are pre-assembled and some of them are protected elements under trade treaties, again, it doesn't meet UK rules of origin. So when they export to Europe, duties are due. Then to further complicate this, we have this issue that if SI Protech are selling some goods to a customer in the EU, if that customer wants to sell those goods back to someone else in the UK, because those goods weren't manufactured in the EU, notwithstanding the fact they originally came from the UK, the sale back to the UK is subject to duty. So we've got some of these really kind of ludicrous rules around duty and goods moving. And I guess the message I want to make is that if goods move from any more than A to B, there probably is a duty issue. If they're going from A to B, B to A to B again, you probably have some issues. or indeed you've got C, D and E in all of this as well. There are a number of customs regimes that businesses can take advantage of to avoid some of these problems, but they are complicated to set up. You do need to have quite robust systems in place. So for larger or more established manufacturers that might have things like ISO 9000 and things like that, and certain systems in place, it is easier to get some of these processes agreed with HMRC. But nevertheless, it still takes time to set up. You could be talking 3 to 6 months. There are costs and there is administration. So there are these opportunities available, but it's not as quick and simple as I've just got to fill in an online application and I'll get a number through in the post in due course.
Is that a good moment to mention the SME Brexit Support Fund?
Yes, it is, Tony. That's a good point. So
that was teed up nicely, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed. So what the government have done is they have recognised that for the SME sector in particular, these changes in rules and these kind of complications are causing a headache, and they do need kind of professional advice. A new grant funding scheme has been made available it's a few weeks back, and it provides up to £2,000 to any business who is trading with Europe, and that can be selling or importing from, and needs advice or training around customs, VAT and those associated matters. So it's a simple case of any business that thinks they can benefit from having some VAT or customs advice can apply for this grant. The process is fairly simple. All you need to have is a quote from a suitably qualified professional firm, such as your accountants. You can submit that quote online on the portal, and if you get approval, as I say, up to £2,000 of fees will be covered by the grant funding, essentially enabling you to get a bit of free tax advice, which we're finding is much needed, particularly as Kathy mentioned earlier. There's plenty of businesses out there that need the advice. They know they need the advice, but as a result of COVID, other strains and things, it's another cost that if you can avoid it, you want to, but it's difficult balancing act. So hopefully that will be useful for businesses.
Okay, thank you. I'll give Dan a rest from speaking for a moment, and I'm going to ask Debbie a question. Toby asks, does Brexit have an impact on my intellectual property rights that I've got registered?
Yes, it will do, depending on what the registrations are. So if you haven't already got a separate UK registration and you have an EU registration, for example, for trademarks or patents, the position at the moment is that you will effectively be given a like right under UK law. So it effectively will mirror what you've got registered in the EU at the moment. However, it will be classified as a separate right. So if so as and when, for example, your trademark comes up for renewal, that will require renewal both in the EU for the EU mark as well as in the UK. So you'll have to then treat them as two separate marks moving forward, but they will divide out, would have divided out at the end of transition period. Looking at sort of your IP generally, you'll probably want to review where you're trading at the moment, where the key market sectors are for you, and where you might want to make any additional IP registrations, which wouldn't necessarily fall off the back of an EU mark. You might have to have UK IP registered first, and then make sure that you're then replicating that in other countries. So it will depend on your markets that you're trading in and where you need protection in place. And the other thing is sort of looking at new product development. If you're developing new products, making sure that you've got a probably a procedure. I don't know whether I know a lot of manufacturers will have an IP procedure in place to do clearance checks. So when you're doing clearance checks, to make sure that there's no overlapping IP for your potential new product in other territories, that you're making sure that you're treating the UK and EU as two separate regimes for when you're doing your initial checks. As well as any new applications.
Okay, sticking with sort of legal issues, Debbie, data protection was a big issue that the EU really brought in. They brought in loads of rules. Now that we're out, have the rules changed, and do we need to get separate agreements or procedures in place to cover personal data for all the different countries we deal with?
Oh gosh, right. Breaking that down. So GDPR's in about 1 minute. GDPR's obviously came in place a couple of years ago, 4 years ago now, and have, I know, been a bit of a pain in the neck for certain businesses in terms of putting in place procedures, making sure that they have up-to-date privacy policies, data sharing agreements, things like that. However, I think now that we've lived with them for a little while, I think most businesses have got quite used to them. Now, at the time at which we got to Brexit, the GDPRs have been had already been assumed into UK law through the UK Data Protection Act of 2018. So we already have GDPRs embedded in our rules anyway. The position with Brexit, though, is that when you are looking at EU data subjects, if they are transferring their data, or if EU data subjects data is being transferred to the UK is now no longer a member state and therefore considered as a third country for the purposes of data protection rules in the EU. What that means is that data can only be transferred from about EU data subjects to the UK where there is either what's called an adequacy decision in place, so the EU deem us worthy of protecting data protection, or you have to have other measures in place which include signing up to model clauses and things like that. Luckily, by the time we got to the EU UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement at the end of last year, in that it confirmed that there was going to be a 6-month period during which the EU would make an assessment about, well, 4 months that could be extended to 6 months, that could make an assessment as to an UK being adequate. I'm happy to report that as from last week, the EU has issued a draft adequacy decision for the UK. So in the course of the next few weeks, we are hoping that we will receive the full adequacy decision, which basically means we wouldn't have to put any additional model clauses or things like that in place where EU data is coming back to the UK. Doesn't mean that we can't then ignore the rest of the stuff. So if we haven't got data sharing agreements or data processing agreements in place, they still need to be done, but the international transfer element will be less problematic.
Okay, thank you. Lou, I'll ask you a very quick question if I can, because I'm conscious of the time is pressing on. Lou, can you give me a quick summary of how the Growth Hub can help businesses in the short to medium term currently?
Yes, of course. So we do have, they used to be called account managers. We do have growth relationship managers now who are available to talk to all businesses. Again, that's all free of charge. We have a lot of information on the Growth Hub, and the growth relationship managers carry that information with them. We have 3 different diagnostic tools that we can use. We've got a growth mapper, a DNA6, which is a digital diagnostic tool, and something called Grow My Company, which is a benchmarking tool. So they have a lot of resources that are available to use with the businesses to help to diagnose where the problems are. We have a lot of resources in terms of where we can signpost those businesses. And we also have the Growth Champion program, which will offer, and starts again fairly shortly, will offer a full day's worth of an expert support free of charge to the business. We have a network of growth champions. They can, those champions can be found on our portal under business services, but they're curated through the growth relationship managers. So Ryan Davies, who's the team leader, you can talk direct to him, or you can put an inquiry on our website. And of course, we've got peer networks coming up very soon in the future. And we've got some other exciting programs which we're looking at in terms of under 5 employees and also scale up businesses, but they're in the development phase at the moment. So we're doing as much as we can with the budgets that are available to us. But the first port of call is really to fill out an inquiry form on the website, or contact Karen Tyrrell, who's in the attendees today, or Ryan Davies, or even myself. So we will offer as much support as we can, and any new bits of information. For instance, I will just say this very quickly, the Royal Academy of Engineering is offering, and they've just reopened this, offering £10,000 towards the development, towards leadership and management training for manufacturing and engineering companies. And the applications are open, and I think they're closing. I'll put a link in the portal, but there's a whole package of support there to develop leaders within the engineering and manufacturing arena. So I'd urge people to take advantage of that, because that's a fairly and there's no pre-requirement to they can decide which of the leadership programs they want to go on. They don't have to comply with anything that the Royal Academy have suggested. So it's definitely worth exploring. I'll put a link in the chat now. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, I'm going to be putting up the polls in a moment, but first I'm going to leave a parting question for all panelists, and your answers will have to be quick and succinct, if I may. Looking forwards, and firstly, I do apologise to everybody who sent in questions. We've got a lot of questions that we haven't managed to get onto, ranging from banking to finance to artificial intelligence to R&D to lots of things. And I'm sorry that we haven't managed to get onto them all. It's almost, we could have done another one of these and probably still not got through them all. If I can ask this one parting question, with the challenge, what do you see as being your biggest challenge in the next 6 months? Shall we start with Alan?
For our company, it's getting new product developments into the market in the timescale that we've set.
Okay, Kathy.
And we all know that.
Oh, sorry, no, there's more.
Sorry, I just want to say that, you know, I have a maxim that 2 times 2 and a half, 2 times 2 times a half. It takes you twice as long, costs you twice as much, and the benefits are often half what you thought. But that, yeah, that's our biggest challenge. It's always being optimistic that the market will take this faster than the reality.
Kathy.
So I think my biggest challenge is around space and premises, because actually I really want to expand our distillery, be able to increase our product range and do some bloody amazing things with this whole new sector that we've got started in Brighton and Hove. But also I want it to be within Brighton and Hove. I think that a product that's called Brighton Gin should be made in the place that it's identified with, and finding space to expand into is massively challenging. So if anyone listening to this has got a massive barn in the centre of Brighton that they want to know what to do with, I'd love to hear from you.
Chris. Next 6 months, biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think obviously rebuilding post-COVID is going to be a big priority for a lot of companies, but I want to pick up on something that Lou just mentioned, really, around management and training. And a lot of leaders, a lot of managers will feel almost obliged to be superheroes and assume that they need to have all the answers, whether that's for, you know, their teams internally or on panels like this. They assume that because they're in charge of a company or in charge of a team that they have to have all the answers. And I think the last year or so has proved that it doesn't matter if you don't have all the answers. And some of the schemes that Lou mentioned, and there are plenty out there, get yourself on a leadership scheme, get yourself on a management training scheme, go out and speak to other companies, other manufacturers, other companies from other sectors, because, you know, sharing ideas, much like I've said all the way through, really, sharing ideas and sharing problems is the easiest way to kind of find answers that work for everyone.
Okay, that leads quite nicely into me mentioning the Edge Digital seminars at the end. So thank you for that. Anybody else got anything they want to say in terms of biggest challenges for the next 6 months?
I think I'll just echo what I was going to say. What Chris was going to said actually was around. I think a lot of businesses are still recovering from the effects of both pandemic and understanding their what the impact of Brexit has been on them, and particularly leading up to July, and what other changes might be in place that Dan was talking about earlier as well. So I think the next 6 months will probably be about finding their feet a little bit more, with hopefully growth more towards the end of the year, and a lot of the clients that we've been speaking to have all been taking the opportunity of the pandemic to review a lot of their practices and procedures, and I think a lot of them are now going to be being put in place. So hopefully there'll be some positive lessons learned as well from that.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that to sum up, it's interesting to hear the topics we touched on. Sorry we didn't get onto all the topics that came up. I think at one end of the spectrum we had lots of issues that probably didn't exist more than a few months ago, and but it's uplifting to see how the sector's adapted to those problems. And at the other end of the spectrum, we had some problems that continue to persist and are not going away, like the skills gap. And I know we had a question on STEM that I didn't get to ask, so sorry about that. Plenty to think about, I think. A big thank you to the panel for their wise words, and to you all for watching. I do hope you found the session interesting. If we can bring up the poll for future topics. So there are going to be 10. There's 10 on this particular screen. This is part one. There's going to be another 10 come up in a second. If you could just click through all those topics that you think you would be interested in seeing or listening to or being a part of, whether that's as a webinar or as an event that we, heavens forbid, we can all turn up to together. Click on as many as you like. I'll give you a few seconds. Those that would be of interest.
Do it at the end of the day, Tony. We can have a gin and tonic afterwards.
Exactly. Okay, and I think if we can store that data and put up the second part. Do make sure you scroll down, because if it's not showing the full list of 10. Okay, I thank you for filling that in. That's useful. We'll collate that data and have a look at, see what topics that you feel are the ones that you want to see next time round. That's great. One final bit I did mention, the bit that I like to call signposting. Ravi of Edge Digital has reminded me of their upcoming series of digital breakfasts specifically for manufacturing businesses. They're free to attend. They typically get about 20 or so directors and senior leaders attending. They partnered this time with the Institute of Engineering and Technology and the All-Party Parliamentary Manufacturing Group to collate manufacturers' perspectives on environmental issues and sustainability issues ahead of COP26, which was mentioned earlier. To find out more, you can go to their website, www.edge-digital.co.uk/net zero, or go to their website and sign up for the news of their events. They're always great. They always get great feedback, and I think, Lou, you'd second that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
There you go.
They're great guys and great programs. So, definitely log on to them.
Okay, well, thank you for I've got Alan would like to answer one of the questions before we go. It's about the banking. I've got a thing saying Alan would like to answer this question. Final point then, Alan, you're on mute. It says, so the question was, have you had enough support from your bank over the last 12 months, and what could they have done more to help you? You're on mute, Alan.
Simple answer, yes and nothing.
Oh, there you go. That was a quick and easy one. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. I think if anybody's got any further comments they want to leave and put into the chat, then do. But otherwise, I wish you all a good afternoon, and thank you for watching.